All right, good evening. It's Wednesday, October 21st. We're going to go ahead and catch up with the rest of the news going on today, starting with, let's see. Now, if you've been keeping up with the news, we learned today that people are dying from the vaccine trials. That is terrible. Young people who are healthy are dying from the vaccine trials. Uh, we have a name now for brain damage associated with SARS-2. According to a lot of the latest studies, there's a lot more info going on with the whole brain damage and behavioral changes associated with the virus. Now, the mainstream media won't talk about this till months later, but we're ahead of the curve. Anyhow, let's see. So France extends virus rules to the entire country as new cases threaten to overwhelm hospitals. Prime Minister Jean Castex of France on Thursday extended to the entire country health restrictions that had so far been imposed only in areas hard hit by the virus. Now keep in mind, I think this is 11 days ago, but we'll catch up to the latest news. The new rules were announced shortly after the French police searched the homes and offices of several current and former officials as part of an inquiry into the government's response to the SARS-2 pandemic. If I remember, actually, months ago, France was under investigation for their handling of the pandemic. I guess the topic is back at hand. Starting Saturday, all restaurants will have to follow a strict health protocol that includes keeping registers of customers for contact tracing and keeping seating to no more than 6 per table. Private parties will be forbidden in public spaces, and rules to encourage social distancing, such as limiting the number of spectators or visitors in cultural venues or customers in shopping centers, will be enforced throughout the country. The rules are part of the renewed state of emergency announced by President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday. Other measures include a nightly curfew around Paris and 8 other major cities for at least 4 weeks. Residents of affected areas will be barred from leaving their homes between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. and will have to carry a form of explaining the reasons for travel during the time slot. Mr. Castex said. Permitted outings include work, dog walking for whatever reason, trips for health reasons, and travel to and from train stations and airports. Some 12,000 police officers will be deployed throughout the country to enforce the curfew, said Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin. The French government has been harshly criticized for its handling of the first wave of the virus, as I was saying earlier, from March to May, which resulted in about 30,000 deaths. A critical shortage of masks and testing kits led to the virus' rapid spread and prompted France to impose one of the world's strictest nationwide lockdowns. 8 million Americans have slipped into poverty as federal aid has dried up. After an ambitious expansion of the safety net in the spring saved millions of people in the U.S. from poverty, the aid is now largely exhausted, and poverty has returned to levels higher than before the SARS-2 crisis, 2 new studies have found. The number of poor people has grown by 8 million since May, according to researchers at Columbia University, after falling by 4 million at the pandemic start as a result of a $2 trillion emergency package known as the CARES Act. Using different definitions of poverty, researchers from University of Chicago and Notre Dame found that poverty has grown by 6 million people in the past 3 months, with circumstances worsening most for Black people and children. These numbers are very concerning, said Bruce D. Mayer, an economist at the University of Chicago and an author of the study. They tell us people are having a lot of trouble paying their bills, paying their rent, putting food on the table. Significantly, the studies differ in the most recent months. While the Columbia model shows an improvement in September, the Chicago and Notre Dame analysts found poverty continue to grow. It's gonna grow, which means it's not gonna grow. The recent rise in poverty has occurred despite an improving job market. An addiction to the economy has been rebounded too slowly to offset the lost benefits. The Labor Department reported Thursday that 885,000 Americans filed new claims for unemployment benefits last week, an increase from the previous week. This is 1010, by the way. That figure is not adjusted for seasonal variations. Over the past months, large employers including United Airlines, Disney, and Allstate announced tens of thousands of layoffs, and more are expected as sectors like leisure and hospitality struggle. In some states, restaurants have salvaged some business by serving diners outside, but many will lose that option as temperatures fall and the winter approaches. London tightens restrictions as a second wave of virus catches. Oops. Oh, by the way, if you don't watch Kevin McCarran, you should because he's somebody who has studied the mind and he knows the effects that the virus has on the brain way better than I could ever understand. So just a PSA. So London tightens restrictions as a second wave of virus cases watches over Europe. Within London, the average number of cases now stands at 97 per 100,000 people, near the threshold for negotiating a move from medium to high risk alert level. Virus-related hospital admissions and deaths are on the rise. People from different households will be barred from meeting indoors starting Saturday as the city shifts into England's second highest alert level, Health Secretary Matt Hancock announced in Parliament on Thursday. People will also be discouraged from using public transportation. The increased measures will also apply to the city of York and northern England, as well as the Essex region and parts of central England. The weekly number of new SARS-2 cases in Europe is now at its highest point since the start of the pandemic, a top World Health Organization official said on Thursday of last week, urging governments to impose tighter, targeted controls on social gatherings. We're at a critical moment in our fight against SARS-2, London's Mayor Sadiq Khan said during a meeting at City Hall on Thursday. He sharply criticized the government's virus testing program in a statement a short while later. I know these further restrictions will require Londoners to make yet more sacrifices, but the disastrous failure of the test, trace, and isolate system leaves us with little choice, he said in the statement. Harris halts in-person campaigning after an aide tests positive for SARS-2. The Biden campaign announced Thursday that it was suspending Senator Kamala Harris' campaign travel through Sunday after two people who had traveled with her tested positive for SARS-2. Hours later, the campaign said a person who had been aboard Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s plane had also tested positive. The announcements were the Biden campaign's closest known brush with the virus. The two people who had traveled with Miss Harris, her campaign communication director, Liz Allen, and a flight crew member flew with her last Thursday when Ms. Harris campaigned with Mr. Biden in Arizona. The person who Mr. Biden's flights who tested positive, an employee of the company that chartered the plane, was aboard for trips to Ohio on Monday and to Florida on Tuesday, but was a great distance from Mr. Biden, the campaign said. Moving along, a college president steps down after a major outbreak on campus. The State University of New York at Oneonta on Thursday announced the abrupt resignation of its president only weeks after it experienced the most severe SARS-2 outbreak of any public university in the state. The departure of the president, Barbara Jean Morris, comes amid widespread turmoil at colleges and universities across the country as they try to maintain some semblance of campus life during the pandemic. Both Oneonta has stood out for its troubles. Last month, more than 700 students have tested positive for the virus, leading the college to shut down in-person classes. The fallout from the crisis led to a state review, a change of SARS-2 protocols throughout the SUNY system, and now the resignation of Dr. Morris, who did not offer any public comment on Thursday. More Swiss guards test positive, raising concerns for the Pope's health. 11 members of the Swiss Guard have tested positive for SARS-2, according to a report in the Associated Press, prompting fears of an outbreak within the small corps charged with protecting the Pope. On Monday, the Vatican said 4 guards were infected with the virus and showing symptoms. Now 7 more have tested positive, according to the AP, or Associated Press. The brightly clad Swiss Guards provide ceremonial guard duty during papal masses and stand at the Vatican gates. They also serve as personal guards for the Pope, established in the early 16th century by Pope Julius II. The guard is considered the world's oldest standing army. Pope Francis, who was 83, is known for his relatively informal, friendly relationship with the guards. He has made a custom of shaking hands with them as he leaves his suite in the morning. Last week, Francis was photographed maskless at a large indoor gathering at the Vatican, speaking closely with attendees and kissing the hands of newly ordained priests. Surgery in his early 20s left Francis missing parts of one lung, a pulmonary deficiency, as one biographer put it, that might make it difficult to breathe through a mask. Now, if you read the latest news on the Pope, he finally kneeled and started wearing the mask. By the way, now we're at 10:16. A top White House SARS-2 advisor has resisted testing, pushing for herd immunity instead. Dr. Atlas said there was a likelihood that only 25 or 20% of people need the infection. Complete lie, baseless, no science, by the way. An apparent reference to a threshold for the so-called herd immunity that has gone widely disputed by epidemiologists. If you want to get herd immunity, you're looking for at least 60 to 70% of the population. If that happened, it's gonna be chaotic. So that's just a complete fraud. The spread through rural America has created problems in small towns that lack key resources. Wyoming, which did not have 1,000 total cases until June, recently added more than 1,000 in a single week. Reports of new infections have recently reached record levels in Alaska, Colorado, and Idaho. In Montana, where more than half of the state's cases have been announced this August, is averaging more than 500 cases per day. False positive rapid tests briefly threw an NFL team into disarray. Hours later, the team announced that it had been wrong. The 4 individuals who had tested positive for the virus were retested and found to be negative. Although faster, more convenient, and cheaper than typical laboratory tests, rapid tests for SARS-2 are far less accurate. They more often miss cases of SARS-2 as well as mistakenly label healthy people as infected. It's very interesting, actually. Still, rapid tests make up a growing contingent of the testing landscape in the U.S. In September, the White House announced detailed plans to ship 150 million rapid tests manufactured by Abbott Laboratories to governors and vulnerable committees around the nation. Much of the scrutiny on rapid tests has focused on false negatives, which can hasten the spread of disease and when cases are missed. But false positives can be damaging as well, keeping the employees out of workplaces and triggering unnecessary anxiety. In some cases, people who receive false positives may be isolated with individuals who are actually harboring the virus, raising the risk of further spread. So testing is a mess, it's unreliable, there's false positives, false negatives. I have no faith in these tests. It's horrible. The first U.S. distribution plan for vaccines uses CVS and Walgreens to get any approved to those in long-term care. The Trump administration said Friday that it would contract with CVS and Walgreens pharmacies to provide free SARS-2 vaccines once they are available to residents of long-term care centers around the country, offering one of the first clues into how vaccines will be distributed. The partnership will provide convenient and free vaccination to residents of nursing homes across America, another historic achievement in our efforts to get a safe and effective vaccine to America as fast as possible, Alex Azar, the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, said in a prepared statement. No SARS-2 vaccines are currently ready for approval by Food and Drug Administration, and the timeline for the development is unclear. However, the statement said that the program, called the Pharmacy Partnership for Long-Term Care, is being established with its goal of having at least one vaccine available by the end of the year. Belgium will impose a nationwide curfew and shut all cafes, bars, and restaurants for a month starting Monday. So today's Wednesday. That was 2 days ago. The curfew will be in place from midnight to 5 a.m., and alcohol sales will be forbidden after 8 p.m. Companies must allow employees to work from home, and gatherings in private homes should be restricted to 4 visitors, officials said. The measures will be reevaluated in 2 weeks. Greece imposed a lockdown on the northern region of Kozani on Friday, closing shops and restaurants and banning travel outside the region after a spike in new cases. The restrictions will apply on October 29th. Kozani is the first Greek region to reimpose such measures and will also ban gatherings and require face masks in public. Schools remain open. A Berlin court ruled against a city order that forced bars and restaurants to close at 11 p.m., but upheld a ban on alcohol sales starting at the same time. The decision, in which the justices said that it was not apparent that the rule on closings would help to contain the virus, came less than a week after the restrictions went into effect. The justices relied on data from health authorities who found that most new infections come from private parties and institutions like senior homes, hospitals, places of worship, or travel. City officials had not yet decided whether to appeal. On the rule starting Friday in Scotland, couples who marry or enter civil partnerships will no longer be required to wear face masks during the ceremony. In workplaces, masks will be mandatory in cafeterias, except for when seated at a table, and starting Monday, face coverings will be required in communal areas and offices. The country already requires face masks to be worn in public transport, in shops, and other indoor public spaces. The virus is back on board the Navy carrier Theodore Roosevelt. 6 months after a virus outbreak in the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt triggered a political tsunami in Washington that led to the firing of the ship's captain and the subsequent resignation of his boss, the acting secretary of the Navy, SARS II, has returned to the ship. The Navy said that 2 sailors aboard the nuclear-powered Roosevelt, which is at sea near San Diego, tested positive for the virus in the past 3 days. Both of the sailors have been evacuated, and the people aboard the ship with whom they had contact have been quarantined. The sailors have self-reported after experiencing symptoms, received immediate medical treatment, and were transported off to the ship for isolation, said Commander Zach Harrell, a spokesman for the Naval Air Forces. He said that contact tracing aboard the ship has been completed. The reappearance of the virus aboard the Roosevelt immediately sparked worries among crew members who remembered the torturous experience of the spring, when an outbreak spread to some 1,100 sailors and led to a week-long stay in Guam and the firing of the ship's commander, Captain Brett Crozier, after he wrote a widely distributed letter appealing for help. Super spreading sports events. 18 members of the Yale University men's hockey team have tested positive for SARS-2, according to an email sent by a school official Thursday, prompting Yale to pause all in-person varsity and intramural athletics indefinitely. A CDC report published Friday about an indoor hockey game in Florida in June that has been linked to 15 infections amplify concerns about the safety of indoor sports. The player believed to have spread the virus developed symptoms the day after the game. Indoor ice rinks, the report said, are an ideal transmission environment because of the deep breathing that happens during intense exertion and the proximity between players during the game and the locker rooms. Testing paranoia. But in fact, there exists no test that can definitely determine whether someone who was infected with SARS-2 can still spread it. That's important to keep in mind. We do not have a test for cure, and we do not have a test for infectiousness, said Omai Garner, a clinical microbiologist at the University of California, Los Angeles. Not all coronavirus tests are designed to detect the same parts of the virus, and a negative on one test does not necessarily guarantee a negative on another. As recently as Tuesday, for instance, a rapid antigen test called BinaxNOW, was unable to detect the coronavirus in Mr. Trump, but results yielded from a laboratory test which used a slower but more accurate technique called polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, showed he still carried genetic material from the virus at low levels in his body. We don't just look at these tests in the context of coronavirus, yes or no, said Carissa Colbres, a clinical microbiologist at Tricor Reference Laboratories in New Mexico. There is no definitive threshold which researchers can say someone is or is not infectious, she said. and it is very possible to be antigen negative but PCR positive. The mayor of Liverpool has revealed his brother is in ICU with SARS-2 and urged people to follow the rules to prevent the spread of the virus. Joe Anderson said on Twitter that his eldest brother was in a very serious condition in hospital in the city, the first area to face the toughest local lockdown restrictions in England after being placed on a very high alert level. A total of 181 students and staff at a private boarding school in Nigeria's capital, Lagos, have tested positive for SARS-2, state health authorities said. Authorities said there has been a minor but significant outbreak among the 441 staff and students at the school in the suburb of Lekki, and said most of the now quarantine positive cases are asymptomatic. Italy has registered 10,000 new infections in 24 hours, the health ministry said. It is the highest daily tally since the start of the country's pandemic, and up 13% from the previous high of 8,800 posted the day before. Also, Malta is making the wearing of face masks mandatory in public and ordering clubs, bars, and places of entertainment to close at 11 p.m. to reduce the spread of SARS-2, the Prime Minister Robert Abela said. Teen on family trip spread SARS-2 to 11 relatives across 4 states after a negative test, CDC says. A 13-year-old girl spread SARS-2 to 11 relatives across 4 states this summer, despite testing negative 2 days before a 3-week family vacation, a recent journal article released by the CDC revealed. The trip occurred at an undisclosed location in June and July, and the infected family members from ages 9 to 72 who traveled at a home that was shared between 5 households. No mask or distancing measures were in place. The teen was exposed to an unspecified SARS-2 outbreak in June before testing negative, the report says. Nasal congestion was their only symptom. The main thing with this case is that when you test somebody for SARS-2, you may just miss it. You might not have a peak viral replication yet, says Brad Pollock, the Associate Dean of Public Health Sciences at the University of California at Davis. It takes your body a good 3 to 5 days of incubation, and if it's day 4, then you might test negative. But 12 hours later, you could go from a low viral count to millions. Pollock says Thanksgiving gatherings and other family reunions should continue to be held outside, noting that families in warmer locations will have an easier time sticking to the rule. I live in California where we can be outside in November for Thanksgiving, he says. You have to assume anyone at a gathering could be harboring the virus. One of Utah's largest hospitals has no beds left Friday in its regular ICU unit as the governor declared the state's week-long spike in SARS-2 cases unsustainable. The chief medical officer at University of Utah says the hospital had to set up extra ICU beds staffed by doctors and nurses working overtime to care for its critical patients this week, or last week, I guess, as the unit has hit 104% capacity. He says the hospital can't take another hit, and administrators are very concerned looking ahead to flu season. State health officials reported nearly 1,500 new cases of the virus, a near record that portends to new restrictions. For the second straight day, Wisconsin reports single-day positive SARS-2 cases record. More than 3,800 new positive SARS-2 cases were reported Friday, breaking all previous single-day records. Las Vegas sees spike in SARS-2 cases within inmates, 43 in a single unit. According to the city, 43 presumed positive cases of SARS-2 have been reported at a unit housing 91 inmates. We are now at 10:18, so we are raging on. Italy's mayors get new SARS-2 powers amid record cases. Italy's mayors will have the power to impose 9 p.m. curfews in their towns and cities if necessary, as the country tries to contain a SARS-2 resurgence. Restaurants must close at midnight and serve no more than 6 people per table at a 6 p.m. closure. For bars that don't serve food are also among the new restrictions announced by the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte on Sunday night. Schools remain open while gyms and swimming pools have a week to tighten safety measures. Some regions, including Campania, close schools until the end of October. We cannot waste time. We must implement measures to avert a generalized lockdown, which could severely compromise the economy, Conte said. Italy recorded 11,700 new SARS-2 infections on a Sunday, up from previous record of 10,900 registered on Saturday and 69 deaths. Slovenia to declare a state of epidemic. Slovenia's prime minister has said on Twitter that a 30-day epidemic will be declared on Monday, with strict measures to be imposed nationally. The government had said it would announce an epidemic if the country passed three indicators: a 14-day average of 140 cases per 100,000 residents, 250 hospitalizations, and 50 in ICU. It comes after secondary schools moved to remote teaching only, while the government asked doctors to cut back on emergency medical procedures and split the country into orange and red regions, depending on infection numbers. Red regions face stricter SARS-2 measures, including restaurants only open for takeaways and mandatory mask wearing in public. The country's first epidemic was announced in early March and remained in full force until May. France reports nearly 30,000 new infections. The French Health Ministry reported 29,000 new confirmed cases of SARS-2 on Sunday after reporting a record high of 32,000 on Saturday and 85 new deaths after 90 the previous day. Sek Erekat in hospital. A senior figure in the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, has been taken to the hospital with SARS-2. It has emerged. According to Reuters, witnesses said the chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat has been taken to a hospital from this home in the occupied West Bank by an Israeli ambulance. Erekat tested positive on October 8th. His Twitter account has since been full of posts thanking officials for their well wishes. Yeah, right. However, it now seems his condition has taken a turn for the worse. I should follow up on that one. Haven't heard much afterwards. England will not go into a 2 or 3 week circuit break lockdown, a senior cabinet minister said. Michael Gove insisted the government was right to ignore its scientific advisors and pursue a plan they have said is insufficient to stop the spread, if not enhance. Also, Thailand has recorded its first locally transmitted case of SARS-2 in more than a month. The foreign minister of Austria and Belgium have both tested positive for SARS-2. New Zealand, which has twice eliminated the virus, reported its first local case for 22 days. South African health minister tests positive for SARS-2. I am now in quarantine at home, and both my wife and I remain optimistic that we will fully recover from this virus, Zweli Mkhize said in a statement. South Africa reported 2,000 practically. South Africa reported 2,000 new cases on Saturday, pushing the total to just over 700,000 and 18,000 deaths. A protest in Prague against the Czech Republic's new SARS-2 restrictions turned violent on Sunday as police used tear gas and water cannons to disperse an unruly crowd about 4 times larger than currently allowed. Some 2,000 protesters in the city's historic center, many of them unmasked, were objecting to measures imposed on Wednesday, including a ban on sporting enemies. Let's see. When representatives of the city's town hall tried to end the event after an hour, the crowd became unruly. And when the police began to try and break the protest up, some in the crowd began throwing bottles, trash bins, and flares. The police responded with greater force. The Czech Prime Minister, Andrej Babis, tweeted, "I am shocked how inconsiderate and selfish some citizens are. They do not follow the government restrictions and put both themselves and others in harm's way. I am for a strict recourse." Okay, so now we're at the 19th. This was Monday. Poland's deputy prime minister and de facto leader, Jarosław Kaczynski, is going into quarantine after learning that he had been in contact with someone infected with SARS-2, a government spokesman said, adding that Mr. Kaczynski, now who's 71, feels well and will continue to perform his duties from home. Mr. Kaczynski did not wear a mask when he handed out an award at a ceremony last week, and briefly took off his mask when he was sworn in as Deputy Prime Minister on October 6. Poland largely resisted the first wave of the pandemic with an early lockdown that began in March, but after it reopened all its schools for in-person instruction in early September, case counts started climbing, and the country is now battling a major surge of infections and hospitalizations. Poland has reported 49,000 cases in the last 7 days, according to a New York Times database, and 175,000 in all, with more than 3,500 SARS-2 related deaths. With hospital beds filling up, there is particular concern about the damage that the virus could sow in Poland, which has relatively weak healthcare system and the lowest ratios of doctors and nurses to residents in the European Union. To deal with the surge, the government is transforming the National Stadium in Warsaw into a field hospital. The health minister, Adam Niedzielski, said on Monday that temporary SARS-2 hospitals would also be set up in other major cities, and that he has in discussion with private hospitals about making more beds available. Mr. Niedzielski warned that if the virus continues to spread at its current pace, the country could soon be facing as many as 20,000 new cases a day. Poland, bro, are you okay? Restrictions on non-essential travel between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico will be extended until November 21st. Chad Wolf, the acting secretary of Homeland Security, announced on Monday. We are working closely with Mexico and Canada to identify safe criteria to ease restrictions in the future and support our broader communities, Mr. Wolf wrote on Twitter. In the past 7 days, Canada has reported 16,000 cases, which works out with the 44 per 100,000 people, and in Mexico, 33,000 cases or 27 per 100,000, and the U.S., 400,000 cases, or 119 per 100,000. And of course, Americans are in the lead in dying from the virus. Officials in Melbourne, Australia announced some easing of one of the world's strictest lockdowns, allowing residents to travel up to 25 kilometers from their homes and up to 10 people from 2 households to socialize outdoors. Dan Andrews, the Premier of the state of Victoria, drew a contrast between the situation there and in Britain, where there have been fewer restrictions despite surging cases. Back in August, and at our peak, we reported 725 daily cases. At the same time, the UK reported 891, he said in a statement. Today, as Victoria records 2 new cases, the UK hit 16,000. And as we continue to easing our restrictions, they are being forced to increase theirs. Well, 25 crew members aboard a livestock carrier docked at a port in Western Australia have tested positive for SARS-2. The ship, the Al Misilla, had 52 crew members, and the authorities warned the further positive tests were possible. Prime Minister Sanna Marin of Finland has tested negative for SARS-2, her office said on Monday. She left the European Union summit in Brussels prematurely on Friday because she had come in contact with people who later tested positive. The Prime Minister will continue her self-isolation and she will be tested again on Monday, the office said in a statement. Ms. Marin's voluntary quarantine will end if the second test result proves negative, her office said. CBS announced on Monday that it planned to hire 15,000 workers to prepare for expected increases in SARS-2 and flu cases in the U.S. during the fall and winter months. More than 10,000 of the new roles will be full-time and part-time licensed pharmacy technicians at CVS pharmacy locations to help administer SARS-2 tests, process prescriptions, and dispense medications. Additional team members typically are needed every flu season. Lisa Basiccia, Chief Human Resources Officer of CVS Health, said in a statement. However, we're estimating a much greater need for trained pharmacy technicians this year, given the continued presence of presence of SARS-2 in our communities. The additional hires may also help the company distribute a SARS-2 vaccine when it becomes available, if ever, if federal officials permit pharmacy technicians to administer it. In March, CVS Health announced plans to fulfill 50,000 jobs across the country, the most ambitious hiring drive in the company's history. It said at the time, the company has more than 4,000 drive-through SARS-2 testing sites across the U.S. Separately, Target said on Monday that it would pay a forced bonus to its employees who work in stores, distribution centers, and staff and employee contact centers as the pandemic continues and the retailers' sales have soared this year. More than 350,000 workers will receive $200 by early November, Target said. Ireland is to close much of its economy and society in a SARS-2 lockdown that imposes some of the severest restrictions in Europe. Non-essential shops will close and people are asked to stay at home with a 5-kilometer or 3-mile travel limit for exercise. To curb surging infection rates, the government announced on Monday evening. From midnight on Wednesday, the country will move to its highest lockdown tier for 6 months. Visits to private homes or gardens will not be permitted, and there are to be no gatherings except for tightly controlled weddings and funerals. A graduated fine system of those who breach the 5-kilometer travel limit, with exceptions for work and other purposes deemed essential, will be announced later this week. People who live alone or who are parenting alone can pair with one another households as part of a support bubble. 2 households can meet outdoors within the travel limit. Public transport will operate at 25% capacity. Non-essential retail will close, along with the barbers, shops, beauty salon, gyms, leisure centers, and cultural amenities. Pubs, cafes, and restaurants will be allowed to serve takeout meals only, a devastating blow to an already weakened hospitality sector. In a somber address to announce the restrictions, the Taoiseach, or Michael Martin, said he understood there will be disappointment, loneliness, and despair, but there was hope. Martin said the government had rejected a strategy of zero COVID as unrealistic and a strategy of herd immunity as unethical, because that's what it is. That's what it is. Self-isolation means staying in your own room, away from other members of your household. If you live in a house with a confined case, do not go back to work or school. You must stay at home and restrict your movements for 14 days, he said. Yeah, that sounds nothing like fascism. Just kind of pointing that out. Health officials cited the example of a person who did not restrict his movements after returning from abroad, leading to the infection of 56 individuals in 10 households. Wales is going to a national 2-week firebreak, SARS-2 lockdown. The Welsh government has mounted a staunch defense of the need for a nationwide lockdown as it announced sharp and deep measures. The First Minister, Mark Drakeford, insisted the 2-week firebreak, under which schools, shops, pubs, and hotels will close and citizens will be told to stay at home, was needed to prevent thousands more deaths in the NHS becoming overwhelmed. The move means England is only part of the UK not to bring in a formal national circuit breaker, even though it has been advised to do so by experts on the SAGE committee, by teachers, leaders, doctors, and by the Labour Party. On Monday, 18,800 new lab-confirmed cases of SARS-2 were reported in the UK and 80 deaths. The number of people newly admitted to hospital rose to 988, bringing the total received treatment to 5,600, including 600 on ventilator beds. Matt Hancock, the health secretary, warned the comments of increasing rates of the virus among older people. But following the Welsh announcement, Boris Johnson, a spokesman, defended the UK government's approach. We keep all of our measures under review, but the Prime minister has made some very clear that he doesn't want a return to something like a national lockdown, and he believes that our three-tier approach is the right way forward. He said. That's a lie, and I can tell he's lying. Anyways, last week it emerged that UK ministers had ignored advice from SAGE for a countrywide circuit breaker to avoid catastrophic consequences. Belgium fears tsunami. According to the Belgian Health Institute, Cienzano, Belgium has recorded an average of 8,000 new daily infections over the last 7 days, a 79% rise on the previous week. Last Tuesday, the country reported 12,000 cases in 24 hours. It's the highest daily figure since the pandemic began. Hospitalizations have also risen, with 2,485 people in hospital with SARS-2 on Monday. Officials warn that if cases continue to rise at the same rate, Belgium will fill its capacity of 2,000 ICU units by mid-November. The situation is serious, Prime Minister Alexander De Croo told RTL. It is worse than on March 18th when the lockdown was decided. It's pretty deep. Bars and restaurants across Belgium have shut down for a month, and a nighttime curfew has taken effect as health authorities warn of a possible tsunami of new virus cases in the third hard-hit nation that hosts the headquarters of the European Union. The new measures, implemented on Monday, aim to limit national interactions to slow down the exponential growth of the pandemic in the nation's 11.5 million people. We are really very close to a tsunami, Health Minister Frank van Dusbroek told broadcaster RTL. The new surge of cases has already prompted several hospitals to delay essential operations to focus on treating cases. As of Monday, 2,485 patients were hospitalized in Belgium, including 412 in ICU. The country reported 9,000 new cases and 21 new deaths. Data collected by Johns Hopkins University shows Belgium recorded an average of 73.95 daily cases per 100,000 people over the past 7 days, the second worst record in the EU, behind the Czech Republic. Mr. Van der Bronco described the situation in the capital of Brussels and in the south of the country as the most dangerous in all of Europe. France's new cases slow, but deaths sharply up. France health authorities have reported 13,000 new infections over the past 24 hours, sharply down from Saturday's record of 32,000 and Sunday's 29,000. The Monday figure tends to dip as there are fewer tests conducted on Sundays. Interesting. The 7-day moving average of new infections, which averages out weekly data reporting irregularities, stood above the record of 23,000 level for the second time in a row. The number of people in France who have died from infections rose from 146 to, that's a typo, anyways, versus 85 on Sunday. The cumulative number of cases now totals 910,277, with the country becoming the 8th in the world to have more than 900,000 cases. And close to the end, but I think that's good enough. It's already getting late.